3 days after we buried my father, I sat in a law office conference room across from my brother Brandon and our mother. Attorney Patterson cleared his throat and read the will. Brandon inherited Cascade Manufacturing, Dad's company worth $12 million. I got the old farmhouse on Miller Road where we grew up. The place was falling apart, hadn't been touched in 15 years. Brandon laughed out loud. Guess you should have taken better care of Dad in his final days, huh? My face burned with shame and rage. Patterson cleared his throat again. Actually, mister. Brandon, there's more you need to hear about that property. I looked up from the table, confused by the lawyer's tone. Brandon's smirk started to fade. Our mother sat perfectly still between us, her hands folded in her lap like she was at church. Patterson pulled out another document from his folder. Joel, your father's property includes 83 acres of land. More importantly, it includes water rights dating back to 1872. Water rights? I asked. My voice sounded hollow in that cold conference room. Yes. The original land grant gives you complete control over Miller Creek, which runs through the entire valley. Patterson looked directly at Brandon now. Your manufacturing facility sits downstream, mister. Brandon. According to county records, Cascade Manufacturing requires 300,000 gallons of water daily for its operations. Brandon's face went pale. What are you saying? I'm saying that without Joel's explicit permission, your factory cannot legally access that water. The current agreement your father had in place expires in 90 days. After that, if Joel doesn't grant you access, you'll have to shut down operations. The room went silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. I couldn't process what I was hearing. Brandon stood up so fast his chair scraped against the floor. This is insane. Dad wouldn't do this. Your father knew exactly what he was doing, Patterson said calmly. He slid a thick stack of papers across the table. This is the original 1872 land grant deed. The water rights are irrevocable and legally binding. I watched my brother's face cycle through emotions: shock, rage, fear. Then something calculating crept into his eyes. He sat back down slowly. Our mother finally spoke. I don't understand. Why would he do this? I understood, though. The understanding hit me like a physical blow. For 6 months, I'd been the one taking care of Dad. 6 months of watching pancreatic cancer eat away at the strongest man I'd ever known. I took leave from my job as an automotive technician, moved back into that farmhouse, changed his bedpans when he was too weak to make it to the bathroom, held the bucket when the chemo made him sick, sat in those sterile hospital rooms under fluorescent lights while poison dripped into his veins. Brandon visited twice in 6 months. Both times he stayed less than an hour, checking his phone the whole time, making excuses about business demands and important meetings. Dad barely spoke those final weeks. His voice was gone, stolen by the tumor pressing against his throat, but he'd grip my hand with surprising strength. Those pale blue eyes would find mine, and I'd see something there. Gratitude, maybe. Or maybe he was trying to tell me something. Now I knew what it was. Brandon suddenly changed completely. He stood up again, came around the table, and put his arm around my shoulders. The gesture felt wrong, like a snake coiling. Joel, brother, we need to talk about this like family. His voice was warm now, friendly. Family is everything, right? We can work this out together. I stiffened under his touch, but didn't pull away. I'll make you an offer right now. $10 million cash for the farmhouse and the water rights. That's double what the business is worth. We split everything down the middle, both walk away rich. What do you say? He actually pulled out his checkbook right there in Patterson's office. The leather binding was expensive, the kind that said money without trying. Our mother nodded eagerly. Joel, honey, that's so generous. You should take it. $10 million. More money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. I could pay off my truck, buy a real house, never work another day at the shop, breaking my back under cars for $48,000 a year. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the way Brandon's smile didn't reach his eyes. Maybe it was remembering how he'd looked at his phone while Dad struggled to breathe in that hospital bed. I need time to think about it, I heard myself say. Brandon's mask slipped for just a second. I saw the rage underneath, hot and bright. Then he recovered, squeezed my shoulder hard enough to hurt. Of course, of course. Take all the time you need. He stepped back, straightened his $500 tie. But Joel, you should know the factory employs 600 people. 600 families depending on us to work this out. Their kids, their mortgages, their lives. Think about that. He left without another word. Mother followed him, throwing me a disappointed look over her shoulder. I sat alone with Patterson in that quiet office. Mr. Patterson, what would you do? The old lawyer looked at me for a long moment. Your father was my client for 30 years, Joel. I'm not supposed to say this, but he wanted you to have power in this family for once. Don't give it away too quickly. 2 weeks later, I drove out to Miller Road for the first time since inheriting the property. 23 miles from town, through farmland and rolling hills. I hadn't been back since Dad moved to assisted living 2 years ago. Before that, he'd lived alone for 8 years, ever since Mom left him. She remarried within a year to some accountant named Doug. I never got over it. The farmhouse looked worse than I remembered. The front porch sagged in the middle like a broken back. Shingles were missing from the roof in patches. Up close, I could see cracks in the foundation wide enough to fit my fingers in. Inside was worse. Water damage stained the ceilings brown. The smell of mold hit me like a wall. In the kitchen, part of the ceiling had collapsed, leaving exposed beams and insulation hanging down like guts. Both bathrooms were unusable. The toilets had cracked from freezing. There were dead rats in the walls. I could smell them. My contractor friend Danny came out the next day to give me an estimate. He walked through the whole place, making notes on his clipboard, shaking his head. Joel, man, I'm going to be straight with you. This place needs minimum $200,000 just to be safe to live in. Foundation work alone is $80 grand. New roof, $40. Electrical is a fire hazard. Needs complete rewiring. Plumbing is shot. That's before we even talk about making it nice. I had $32,000 in my savings account. I made $48,000 a year at the shop. The math didn't work. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in my apartment, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Dad's plan. He'd given me leverage over Brandon, but also a money pit I couldn't afford to maintain. What was I supposed to do? Then it hit me. I didn't have to sell. I could lease the water rights annually, charge Brandon $300,000 a year, forever, passive income while keeping the property. Maybe use that money to slowly fix up the farmhouse, turn it back into the home it used to be when we were kids. I met with my own attorney the next day. Cost me $3,000 as a retainer, money I put on a credit card. But she confirmed my strategy was legally sound. We started drawing up a leasing agreement. I called Brandon that afternoon to discuss it. He exploded. The screaming was so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. You ungrateful piece of trash. After everything I've done for you, after I offered you millions, you're going to bleed me dry, is that it? Squeeze your own brother? What exactly have you done for me, Brandon? My voice was calm. Name one thing. He hung up. 10 minutes later he called back. His voice was different, apologetic, almost gentle. I'm sorry, Joel. I'm sorry. The stress of running the company is overwhelming. I shouldn't have yelled. Can we meet? Talk about this calmly? Dinner tomorrow night, just us? I hesitated. I don't know. Please, we're family. Bring Amanda. Make it a double date. I want to apologize properly. Amanda, my girlfriend of 3 years. She was a nurse at County General, 29 years old, with dark hair and a smile that used to make everything better. We'd talked about marriage, looked at rings together. She'd been there through everything with Dad's death, holding me when I cried, telling me it would be okay. All right, I said. Tomorrow night. I arrived at the restaurant 15 minutes early. It was one of those upscale places downtown where the steaks cost more than a car payment. Not my usual scene. I parked my truck between a Mercedes and a BMW, feeling out of place. Amanda's car was already in the lot. A silver Honda Civic I'd helped her pick out 2 years ago. I'd negotiated the price for her, looked under the hood, made sure she wasn't getting ripped off. Why was she here early? I walked inside. The hostess greeted me with a professional smile. I'm meeting Brandon here, I said. Oh, yes, right this way. She led me through the restaurant. past tables of well-dressed people drinking wine that probably cost $100 a bottle. We turned a corner into a more private section, and there they were, Amanda and Brandon, sitting close together in a curved booth. His hand was on the table, her hand was on top of his. Their fingers were intertwined. They looked up when they saw me. Amanda's face went white. Brandon smiled. "Joel," he said, "you're early." I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The restaurant noise faded to a distant hum. "What is this?" My voice didn't sound like mine. Amanda started crying immediately. "Joel, I was going to tell you. I swear I was going to tell you." "Tell me what?" But I already knew. My stomach was a cold stone. Brandon stood up. He was taller than me, always had been, bigger. He'd played football in college. I'd been the skinny kid who liked working on cars. "Amanda and I have been together for 6 months, little brother. Started when you were busy playing nurse with the old man. 6 months. Since March. Since I'd moved back to the farmhouse to take care of Dad. She needed a real man," Brandon continued. His voice was casual, like he was discussing the weather, not someone who wipes up other people's mess. Amanda was sobbing now. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But Brandon can give me things you never could, Joel. A real future. Security." She held up her left hand. An engagement ring caught the light. Diamond. Big enough to choke on. My world tilted. Everything I thought was solid turned to sand beneath my feet. The woman I loved. The woman I'd planned a life with. She'd been sleeping with my brother while I was watching our father die. "Still want to negotiate that water deal?" Brandon asked. His smile was razor sharp. I turned and walked out. Didn't run. Walking felt like moving through concrete, but I made it to the parking lot, made it to my truck. Sat there with my hands on the steering wheel, shaking so hard my teeth chattered. My phone rang. I didn't recognize the number but answered anyway. "Joel, this is Patterson. I have new information you need to hear." "Not now." My voice cracked. "Joel, listen to me. I've been reviewing the property records for the farmhouse. There's a geological survey from 1998 I just found. The land sits on top of significant limestone deposits. High grade, valuable for construction aggregate. The mining rights alone could be worth $8 to $12 million. I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel. More money, more leverage, more power. But I just lost the only person I thought would stand by me through anything. "Are you there?" Patterson asked. "Yeah," I whispered. "I'm here." I had more leverage than ever, and I'd never felt more alone in my life. 1 month later, I was living in the farmhouse, despite its condition. I couldn't stand my apartment anymore. Every corner reminded me of Amanda. Her toothbrush in the bathroom, her clothes in my closet, the Netflix account we shared. All of it felt like poison. So I moved into the least damaged bedroom in the farmhouse, set up a camping cot, sleeping bag, portable heater, used a camping stove to make coffee in the mornings. It was October now, getting cold. The heater barely kept up. I was still working at the auto shop, but I was distracted. Lost 15 pounds because I kept forgetting to eat. My coworkers noticed. My boss pulled me aside twice, asked if I was okay. I lied and said yes. My mother called every few days, screaming at me. I was destroying the family business. 600 families would starve because of my greed. When I tried to explain about Dad's intentions, she'd hang up. She never once asked how I was doing. My younger sister Tracy lived in Seattle. She sided with Brandon, stopped returning my calls. I was completely cut off from my family, but I had the mining rights. I'd been in contact with a company called Bergman Aggregates. They were very interested in the limestone deposits. They offered me $7 million for 20-year mining rights. The operation wouldn't damage the farmhouse location. It would generate ongoing royalties, too. I was drawing up contracts, planning to use the money to repair the house and start fresh. Finally escape from under Brandon's shadow. Then I found out what he'd been doing. Danny called me one afternoon. "Joel, you know the Watson place north of your property? Just got sold." "Yeah?" Company called Mountain Vista LLC bought it. Paid $900,000, way over market value. Something cold crawled up my spine. Who owns Mountain Vista? That's the thing. It's a shell company. Can't find the real owner. Over the next week, I did research. 3 properties surrounding my land had been purchased in the last month. The Chen property to the east for $1.2 million. The Rodriguez land to the west for $800,000. All bought by different LLCs with hidden ownership, but I knew. Brandon had surrounded me. He now controlled every access road except the main county road. Mining trucks would need to cross his land to reach the limestone deposits. He could block them, charge whatever he wanted, make the whole deal impossible. I was starting to understand how good he was at this, how far ahead he thought. While I was grieving and trying to survive, he was playing chess. Then the process server showed up. I got home from work one evening, exhausted and filthy. A man in a suit was waiting by the farmhouse door. "Joel?" He handed me papers. "You've been served." Brandon was suing to overturn the will. The lawsuit claimed Dad had dementia and wasn't mentally competent when he signed. Brandon had 3 doctors ready to testify that Dad was heavily medicated and confused. The suit alleged I'd manipulated a dying man for financial gain. There was a petition for an emergency injunction to freeze all property transactions. The court date was set for 45 days out. My hands shook as I read the papers. This wasn't just about money anymore. Brandon was calling me a manipulator, an abuser, making me out to be the villain. The next day, my attorney called with worse news. "Joel, I've reviewed the depositions. Your mother gave testimony. What did she say?" "She claims you isolated your father from the family during his final months, that you were angry and controlling, that your father was afraid of you." "That's not true. None of that's true." "I know. But it's in the official court record now. Your brother convinced her to commit perjury. My family had completely turned against me. Mother, brother, sister, all of them choosing Brandon's lies over the truth. Then I found out which judge was assigned to the case. Judge Franklin Harrison. I did some research. Judge Harrison's daughter worked at Cascade Manufacturing. She was Brandon's executive assistant, making $95,000 a year. Clear conflict of interest. My attorney filed a motion to recuse the judge. The motion was denied without explanation. She called me that afternoon. Her voice was different, careful. "Joel, I need to tell you something off the record." "Okay, I think the fix is in. I think your brother got to the judge somehow. Everything about this case feels wrong. The timing, the rulings, the way evidence is being handled." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we're going to lose. Even with all the evidence on our side, I think we're going to lose this case." I sat on my camping cot in that cold, dark farmhouse, surrounded by peeling wallpaper and the smell of rot. Outside, the October wind howled. Inside, my life was falling apart piece by piece, and I had no idea it was about to get so much worse. 3 weeks before trial, the storms came. Late October in the valley meant rain and wind, sometimes hail. This year was particularly bad. Weather reports warned of severe thunderstorms. By then, my legal fees had consumed everything. The attorney required $15,000 to continue representing me. I'd maxed out 2 credit cards paying for depositions and expert witnesses. My savings account was empty. My wages from the shop barely covered gas and food. The farmhouse was deteriorating around me. Every time it rained, new leaks appeared. I'd placed buckets throughout the house, listened to the ping-ping-ping of water at night. The space heater was a fire hazard, ancient and sparking, but it was the only heat I had. I couldn't afford to fix anything. I was trapped in a dying house, fighting a legal battle I couldn't afford, against a brother who seemed to have unlimited resources. The storm hit on a Tuesday night. I was lying on my cot, reading case files by flashlight because the electricity had gone out again. The wind picked up around 10. By 11, it sounded like the house was screaming. Lightning lit up the room in stuttering flashes. Thunder shook the walls. I heard creaking sounds I'd never heard before, groaning, like the house was in pain. At midnight, something changed. The creaking got louder, more urgent. I sat up on the cot, listening. The northwest corner of the roof sounded like it was tearing away from the rafters. Then it did. The sound was enormous, Wood splintering, metal shrieking. A section of roof about 15 feet across just ripped away into the storm. Rain poured through the opening like a waterfall. I jumped off the cot, tried to get to the door. A beam fell from the ceiling, hit my shoulder. I went down hard, the wind knocked out of me. Pain exploded through my upper body. I tried to move, couldn't get up. Something was wrong with my ribs. Every breath felt like knives. My shoulder was on fire. The water was rising on the floor, cold and dark. I managed to reach my phone, call 911, gave them the address between gasps of pain. The dispatcher said help was coming. Stay on the line, don't move. The ambulance took 35 minutes to get there. Rural location, one ambulance for the whole county. They were dealing with multiple emergencies. I lay there in the water and debris, listening to the storm tear my father's house apart. By the time the paramedics found me, I was hypothermic and going into shock. Dislocated shoulder, 3 cracked ribs, concussion. They loaded me onto a stretcher, drove me through the storm to County General, the same hospital where Amanda worked. I prayed I wouldn't see her. They admitted me for observation. I had no health insurance. I'd lost it when I took leave to care for Dad. Never got it back. The hospital bill was going to be $48,000. I signed forms I didn't read, too drugged on pain medication to care anymore. I lay in that hospital bed for 3 days. The ceiling tiles had water stains just like the farmhouse. I stared at them, counting the brown spots, feeling nothing. No one visited, no family, no friends. I'd driven everyone away or they'd abandoned me. The only person who came was my attorney, and she brought bad news. Judge Harrison had granted Brandon's emergency injunction. All transactions involving the farmhouse property were now frozen. I couldn't sell, couldn't lease, couldn't develop. The mining deal with Bergman Aggregates was dead. The water rights couldn't be leased to anyone. There's more, she said. Her voice was apologetic. I have to withdraw from your case. What? Why? You haven't paid the retainer I asked for. I can't continue without payment. I'll get the money. I'll find it somehow. She looked away. Joel, I need to tell you something. Your brother contacted me a month ago, offered me $50,000 under the table to throw your case, to feed him information, make mistakes that would hurt you. My blood went cold. Did you take it? No. I'm returning his check, withdrawing due to ethics concerns. But the damage is done. He's tried to bribe your attorney. That's going to look bad for you if it comes out wrong. And now you have no representation. Trial is in 2 weeks. She left. I was alone again, drugged and broken in a hospital bed, with no money, no attorney, no hope. On the 3rd day, Brandon visited. He walked in carrying an expensive fruit basket wrapped in cellophane. Apples, pears, grapes, chocolate. The kind of gift you give someone when you're pretending to care. He sat in the visitor chair, crossed his legs casually, looked around the room. Looking rough, little brother. I stared at him. Words wouldn't come. You brought this on yourself, you know. All of it. I made you a fair offer. $10 million. You could be living the good life right now. Instead, you're here. He gestured at the hospital room. Broke. Beaten. Alone. Get out. In a minute. I want you to understand something. The trial is a formality. I've already won. Judge Harrison will rule that Dad was incompetent. The business stays with me. You get nothing, but I'm still willing to be generous. He pulled papers from his jacket, set them on the bedside table. $500,000. Sign the property over to me right now, and I'll wire the money today. You can pay off your debts, start over somewhere else. $500,000 is more than you deserve, Joel. It's more than you'll ever see otherwise. I looked at the papers, at my brother's face, at the life he was offering me. Then I remembered something. 1 week before Dad died, when he could barely breathe, when every word was agony, he'd squeezed my hand, pulled me close, whispered something I couldn't quite hear. I'd leaned in. What, Dad? What is it? Brandon. His voice was just air, barely sound. Brandon will try to take everything. Don't let him win. There's a way. I hadn't understood then. I'd been too focused on morphine schedules and oxygen levels and the horrifying sound of fluid in his lungs. But now I understood. Dad had planned for this. For all of it. He knew exactly what Brandon would do because he knew his son. He'd built something into this situation. A trap. A way out. I just had to find it. Get out, I said again. Stronger this time. Brandon's face darkened. The friendly mask dropped. You're going to regret this. I'll make sure you end up with nothing. Not just broke, destroyed. Your name will be dirt in this town. No one will hire you. No one will help you. I'll make sure of it. He stood up, left the fruit basket, walked out without another word. I lay back against the pillows, staring at the ceiling, knowing I was completely trapped. Knowing Brandon was probably right, that I'd end up with nothing. But there had to be a way. Dad had said so. There's a way. I just had to survive long enough to find it. They released me from the hospital after 5 days. I couldn't afford to stay longer. The bills were already catastrophic. I drove back to the farmhouse and found red tags on the door. County building inspector had condemned the property. The storm damage made it structurally unsafe for habitation. I had to vacate within 24 hours or face arrest. I found out later that Brandon's golf buddy was the inspector. Another piece moving on my brother's chessboard. I packed what I could fit in my truck. Sleeping bag, changes of clothes, my toolbox from work, some photos of Dad from when I was a kid, before everything got complicated. I became homeless that day. Started living in my truck, sleeping in Walmart parking lots, 24-hour gym parking lots, anywhere security wouldn't chase me off. I showered at Planet Fitness, $20 monthly membership I could barely afford. $8 menu food when I remembered to eat at all. 2 weeks later, the auto shop let me go. My manager, Steve, called me into his office. He looked uncomfortable, wouldn't meet my eyes. Joel, someone filed a complaint about you. What kind of complaint? They said you were unstable. Mentioned the lawsuit, the hospital stay. A customer complained you, seemed threatening. I've never threatened anyone. I know, but corporate is on me about this. With the complaint on file, I have to let you go. I'm sorry. I knew Brandon had orchestrated it somehow. Maybe paid someone to make the complaint. Maybe just spread rumors until someone believed them. It didn't matter. The result was the same. Unemployed, broke, injured, homeless. And the trial was 1 week away. I spent 3 days sitting in my truck in various parking lots, trying to figure out what to do next. How to represent myself in court when I knew nothing about law. How to fight a system that seemed rigged against me from the start. Then my phone rang. My mother's number. I almost didn't answer. But some desperate part of me hoped maybe she'd come to her senses. Maybe she'd finally see what Brandon was doing. Hello? Joel? Her voice was thin, shaky. She was crying. Joel, I'm in the hospital. My heart dropped. What happened? It's my heart. The doctors think. They think I might not make it this time. I need to see you, before I go. Where are you? I'm at home right now, resting. But I need you to come here. We need to talk, reconcile before it's too late. She was crying harder now. I'm so sorry, Joel. I'm so sorry for everything. Please come. I need my son. I should have known better. After everything that had happened, I should have seen it coming. But she was my mother, and I was desperate for any family connection, any sign that someone still cared. I drove to her house. She lived in a nice subdivision on the east side of town with her husband Doug. Big houses, manicured lawns. I parked on the street, walked up the driveway. The door opened before I could knock. My mother stood there, looking perfectly healthy. Behind her stood Brandon, Doug, and 2 police officers. I realized too late it was a trap. That's him, Brandon said, pointing at me. That's my brother. He's been threatening me for weeks. That's not true. One of the officers stepped forward. Sir, we need you to turn around and put your hands behind your back. I haven't done anything. Brandon pulled out his phone, showed it to the officers. Text messages on his screen. Horrible, threatening messages. Talking about violence, about making him pay. Messages I'd never sent. I didn't send those. He faked them. My mother was crying. Real tears. She'd bought into Brandon's performance completely. He's been stalking me too, officers, showing up unannounced, making threats against my husband. I got a phone call from her an hour ago. She asked me to come here. I never called you, she said. I would never call you. You scare me, Joel. Doug stepped up, nodded solemnly. He's been trying to extort money from us, threatening to hurt my wife if we don't pay. It was all lies. All of it. But they'd coordinated their stories perfectly, 3 against 1. And I was the homeless, unemployed, desperate one with everything to gain. The handcuffs clicked around my wrists. You're under arrest for harassment, stalking, and attempted extortion. They put me in the back of the police cruiser. Through the window, I watched Brandon put his arm around our mother, watched her lean into him, sobbing. Watched Doug pat them both on the shoulders like a supportive father figure. They'd turned my own mother against me, made her an accomplice in my destruction. Bail was set at $25,000. I spent 3 days in county jail before a public defender got me released on my own recognizance, but criminal charges were still pending. 3 felonies that could send me to prison for years. The trial was now only 1 week away. I was at absolute rock bottom. No home, no job, no family, facing criminal charges, about to lose a lawsuit that would take away the only thing I had left. I sat in my truck in an abandoned parking lot off Highway 27. Rain pattered against the windshield. November now, getting colder. My breath fogged the windows. I thought about just driving, heading west, leaving everything behind, starting over somewhere with a new name, letting Brandon win. Then I thought about Dad's hand squeezing mine, his whisper, "There's a way." I started the engine, drove aimlessly through town. At 2 in the morning, I ended up at a 24-hour diner on the edge of the industrial district. Spent my last $8 on coffee and eggs. Sat in a corner booth, staring at nothing. An old man at the counter noticed me, kept glancing over. Finally, he stood up, walked to my booth. "You're Joel, right? Frank's boy?" I looked up. He was in his 70s, white hair, deep lines in his face. I didn't recognize him. Frank was my dad, yeah. I'm Frank Morrison. Your dad and I were best friends for 40 years. I was his attorney before I retired. I barely responded. Another connection to a life that felt like it had happened to someone else. He sat down across from me without asking. "Your father talked about you boys all the time. I watched Brandon grow up, watched him get meaner every year, watched your dad's heart break over it. Why are you telling me this?" "Because your father told me if things ever got bad with Brandon, I should find you. He said there might come a time when you'd need help, a time when Brandon would try to take everything." Frank leaned forward. "Looks like things got bad." I met his eyes, saw something there. Knowledge, intent. "What did my dad tell you?" "Plenty. But first, you need to eat that breakfast. Then we need to talk somewhere private. Because what I have to tell you changes everything." We left the diner at 4 in the morning. Frank Morrison drove a beige sedan that was older than me. He took us to his house on the south side of town. Small ranch style, well-maintained. Inside was cluttered with books and papers. The home of someone who'd lived alone for a long time. He made more coffee while I sat at his kitchen table, shaking from exhaustion and cold and the last gasps of hope. "Your father and I met in 73, Frank said, pouring coffee into mismatched mugs. We were both young, ambitious. I helped him build Cascade Manufacturing from nothing. Was the best man at his first wedding to your mother. I didn't know that. We had coffee every Tuesday morning for decades. Same diner you found me at tonight. Your father talked about you boys constantly, bragged about you when you were kids. Then watched Brandon change, get harder, get greedy. It broke his heart." Frank sat down across from me. "When your father got sick 3 years ago, he asked me to draft his will. I wrote the original version that gave everything to Brandon. That's what Frank wanted at first. Keep the business in the family, traditional succession. What changed? You did. Or rather, Brandon did. 2 years ago, when Frank moved to assisted living, Brandon didn't visit once, not once in 6 months. But you were there every week. Then the cancer came back, and you quit your job, moved home. Your father saw who his sons really were, Frank pulled folded papers from his jacket, set them on the table between us. 6 months before your father died, he called me, asked me to add something to the will, something secret, a codicil. What's a codicil? An amendment, an addition to the original will. Page 7, paragraph 12, subsection C. You never saw this at the reading because Patterson skipped over it. Why would he skip it? I have my suspicions. But read this first. I unfolded the papers. Legal language, dense and confusing. But then I found the section Frank was pointing to. In the event Brandon Daniel inherits Cascade Manufacturing and Joel Michael inherits the property on Miller Road, the following conditions shall apply. If Brandon contests this will, or takes any action legal or otherwise to deprive Joel of his inheritance, or causes intentional harm to Joel's interests, the distribution of assets shall immediately reverse in full. Joel shall receive Cascade Manufacturing and all associated assets. Brandon shall receive the property on Miller Road and no other inheritance. I read it 3 times. Couldn't believe what I was seeing. Is this real? Completely legal and binding. Your father added it 4 days before he died. Had me bring the papers to his bedside, signed them with witnesses present, everything proper. So if Brandon fights me for the property, he loses everything. Complete reversal. You get the company, he gets the farmhouse. My mind was reeling. He's been suing me. He bought properties around mine to trap me. He got me arrested. Doesn't that count as intentional harm? Every bit of it. But there's a catch. Of course there was. You must file a countersuit within 90 days of the will reading. Today is day 88. The trial is in 5 days, which is day 93. But the filing deadline is day 90. That's Wednesday at 5 in the afternoon, when the courthouse closes. That's tomorrow. Yes, tomorrow. I had to file legal papers tomorrow. Papers I didn't know how to prepare. At a courthouse where I had an outstanding warrant for missing a court date on the harassment charges. If I showed up, they might arrest me on the spot. Frank, I don't know how to do any of this. I'm broke. I don't have an attorney. I have a warrant out for my arrest. I know. I've been following your situation. Your brother is thorough. I'll give him that. Then how am I supposed to file anything? Frank slid more papers across the table. I've already prepared everything. The countersuit. All the evidence documented. Affidavits from your former attorney about the bribery attempt. Proof of Judge Harrison's conflict of interest. Evidence that the text messages in your arrest were fabricated. Testimony from your father's actual doctor that he was mentally sharp until the very end. I stared at the stack of documents. You did all this? Your father was my best friend for 40 years. I'm not going to let his son be destroyed by a liar. But you're retired. You can't represent me. No, I can't. You'll have to file this yourself. Tomorrow by 5 p.m. The courthouse closes exactly at 5. Not 5:01. 5. Today was Monday morning. Filing deadline was Wednesday afternoon. I had about 36 hours. My truck broke down yesterday. Needs $400 in repairs. I don't have $400. I don't have 4 cents. Frank stood up, walked to a drawer, pulled out his checkbook. Wrote a check for $600. This is my Social Security money for the month. Use it. Fix your truck. File those papers. And Joel? He looked at me with eyes that had seen a lot of years. Your father believed in you. That's why he set this all up. Don't let him down. I took the check with shaking hands. For the first time in months, I felt something other than despair. Hope. We spent the next 6 hours going over everything. Frank showed me exactly what to do, which forms to file, what order to present them. He couldn't come with me, couldn't represent me officially, but he could coach me. By noon, I had the truck repaired and everything prepared. The filing was ready. I just had to survive until Wednesday afternoon, walk into that courthouse, and submit the papers. At 6 p.m. Monday evening, I was leaving Frank's house with all the documents. Walking to my truck in the driveway, a black Range Rover pulled up, blocking me in. Brandon got out. 2 men I didn't recognize got out with him. Large men, the kind you hire when you need muscle. Hey there, little brother. Brandon's voice was casual, friendly. Funny seeing you here. Been having Frank followed for a few weeks now. Interesting that you two finally connected. My stomach dropped. He'd been watching us, listening. You can't stop me from filing, Brandon. Can't I? He smiled, gestured to the two men. These gentlemen are going to make sure you don't make it to the courthouse Wednesday. Nothing personal, just business. The men started walking toward me. I looked back at Frank's house. The old man was standing in the doorway, face pale. Run, Joel, Frank shouted. I threw my coffee at one man's face, scrambled into my truck. The engine turned over. I backed out fast, nearly hit the Range Rover, pulled forward and drove. In my mirror, I saw one of the men grab Frank. Saw Brandon hit the old man, knock him to the ground. Guilt tore through me, but I kept driving, because Frank was right. I had to file those papers. It was the only way to stop Brandon, the only way to honor what Dad had planned. I drove through the night, paranoid, watching for the Range Rover. Stopped at a 24-hour copy shop at 3 a.m., made copies of everything, just in case. Locked the originals in a storage locker I rented for $20. Tuesday morning, 6 a.m., 35 hours until deadline. I drove toward the courthouse to scout it out. The truck started running rough. Temperature gauge climbing. Smoke coming from under the hood. Brandon's men must have sabotaged it at Frank's house. Cut a coolant line or loosened something. The truck was dying. I made it to downtown before the engine seized. Parked in the courthouse lot. The building didn't open until 8:30. The doors were still locked. At 7, the Range Rover found me. Brandon and his men got out slowly, taking their time. I was trapped. I grabbed the documents, ran to the courthouse steps. They followed. A small crowd of early morning people watched. Someone heading to work, a jogger, an old woman walking her dog. Brandon caught up to me at the courthouse doors. You're going to tear up those papers right now, he said. I clutched them to my chest. No, he pulled out his checkbook one more time. The same leather-bound checkbook he'd used at the first lawyer meeting. How many times had he tried to buy me? $1 million, Joel. Final offer. Walk away right now, and you get 1 million cash, or I will destroy you. More than I already have. You'll end up in prison. You'll have nothing. No one. You'll die alone and forgotten. I said no. One of his men grabbed my injured shoulder. Pain exploded through my body. I cried out, nearly dropped the papers. A courthouse security guard came outside. Middle-aged, bored-looking. What's going on here? Brandon's men backed off immediately. Put their hands up, innocent expressions. Nothing, officer. Just a family discussion. The guard looked at me, saw my face, the pain, the desperation. You okay? I need to file these papers when the courthouse opens. Lobby opens in 90 minutes. You can wait inside when we unlock the doors. Brandon and his men backed away, but they didn't leave. They positioned themselves at different exits, waiting, watching. At 8:30, the doors unlocked. I rushed inside, up to the 3rd floor, to the county clerk's office. Filed everything, all the documents, all the evidence. The clerk reviewed them, stamped them, said they needed a judge's signature to be official. Judge won't be available until 10 a.m. 2 hours. I had to wait 2 more hours. And Brandon knew I was here. At 9:45, Brandon walked into the clerk's office with his men. Saw me sitting there, came straight toward me. I stood up. Stay away from me. Give me those papers. They're already filed. He lunged for the clerk's desk, tried to grab the stamped documents. Security guards appeared, grabbed him, pulled him back. Sir, you need to leave. That's my brother. He's trying to steal from me. They escorted Brandon out. But his men stayed at the exits, watching, waiting. At 10 a.m., Judge Sandra Martinez came to chambers. The clerk brought her the filing. She reviewed it in her office for 20 minutes that felt like hours. Then she called an emergency hearing. Right there, 2 p.m. that same day. Both sides present arguments. Judge Harrison had recused himself after my filing showed his conflict of interest. Judge Martinez was known for being strictly by the book, uncompromising, fair. At 2 p.m., we all gathered in a courtroom. Me representing myself, Brandon with his expensive attorney in a $3,000 suit. They argued the reversal clause was unclear, that it didn't apply, that I was misinterpreting Dad's intentions. I presented Frank's evidence, the bribery attempt, the fabricated arrest, the property manipulation, Judge Harrison's daughter working for Brandon, my mother's perjured testimony. Then, Frank Morrison walked in. His face was bruised, left eye swollen shut. But he walked to the witness stand and testified. About Dad's final wishes, about 40 years of friendship, about watching Brandon become exactly what Dad feared. He produced Dad's original handwritten notes. I'd never seen them. Frank had kept them safe all this time. Dad's handwriting, shaky from the cancer but readable. Brandon has become what I feared, greedy and cruel. Joel is the son I hoped both would be. He deserves everything. Make sure Brandon can't steal it. A representative from Bergman Aggregates testified about the mining deal Brandon sabotaged. A factory floor manager testified about Brandon embezzling from Cascade, manufacturing, creative, accounting, vendor kickbacks. The company was being run into the ground. Judge Martinez took 30 minutes to review everything in her chambers. When she came back, her face was stern. I've reviewed all evidence and testimony. This is one of the most clear-cut cases of malicious intent I've seen in 20 years on the bench. She looked at Brandon. Mr. Brandon, you have repeatedly and systematically tried to deprive your brother of his rightful inheritance. You've used bribery, fraud, physical intimidation, and manipulation of the legal system. The reversal clause in your father's will is clear and enforceable. She looked at me. Mr. Joel, I'm ruling in your favor on every count. The will's reversal clause is now in effect. You are awarded Cascade Manufacturing and all associated assets. Your brother receives the property on Miller Road as specified in the original distribution. Additionally, Mr. Brandon will pay all your legal fees, hospital bills, and damages. I'm also ordering a full investigation into Judge Harrison and Attorney Patterson for potential corruption. The gavel came down. I couldn't move, couldn't process it. Brandon was screaming, his attorney trying to calm him down. Security had to escort him out. I'd won. Against everything. Against all odds. Frank put his hand on my shoulder. His good eye was wet. Your father would be proud. 2 months after the trial, I stood on the front porch of the farmhouse, looking out over 83 acres of land my father had loved. The November wind was cold, but the sun was shining. The house looked different now. I'd sold Cascade Manufacturing to a competitor for $19 million, used $2 million to completely restore the farmhouse. New foundation, new roof, all new electrical and plumbing. The exterior was painted white like it had been when I was a kid. The porch didn't sag anymore. Inside, hardwood floors gleamed. The kitchen where Mom used to make Sunday breakfast was bright and clean. My old bedroom upstairs had new windows that let in morning light. I'd kept some of the money from the sale, invested it wisely, paid off every debt, the hospital bills, the credit cards, even paid back Frank's $600, though he tried to refuse it. Bergman Aggregates still wanted the mining rights. I sold them for $8 million, with a stipulation that they couldn't damage the farmhouse area. They'd start operations in the spring. Ongoing royalties would come for 20 years. I donated $3 million to pancreatic cancer research in Dad's name, set up a foundation to help families dealing with terminal illness, respite care, financial assistance, the things I wished I'd had when Dad was dying. The legal system worked slowly, but it worked. Judge Harrison was forced to retire after an ethics investigation. Attorney Patterson lost his license. Brandon's criminal charges for assault on Frank and attempted bribery were still pending. My sister Tracy reached out a month after the trial. She'd heard everything that happened, finally saw through Brandon's lies. She apologized for not believing me, for abandoning me when I needed family most. We talked on the phone for 3 hours, cried together, made plans for her to visit at Christmas. I told her she was always welcome in the farmhouse. That family wasn't about who hurt you. It was about who stood by you after you'd been hurt. My mother never apologized. She stayed loyal to Brandon, even after everything came out. even after the judge's ruling. She sent me one email saying I'd destroyed the family, that I should be ashamed of myself. I didn't respond. Some relationships can't be repaired. Some bridges burn completely. I'd made peace with that. She'd chosen her path. I'd chosen mine. Amanda tried to contact me after Brandon lost everything. Left her with nothing but broken promises and an engagement ring bought on credit he couldn't pay off. She sent texts, emails, showed up at the farmhouse once. I didn't answer, didn't open the door. She'd made her choice when it mattered. I'd learned what I needed to know about her character. 3 weeks after the trial, I met someone new. Her name was Claire. She worked at the diner where Frank found me that night. She'd seen me at my absolute lowest point, broke and desperate and broken. She'd been the one who served me those $8 eggs. She told me later she'd noticed me, the sadness in my eyes, how I'd looked like someone who'd lost everything but was still trying to fight. We started talking. Just coffee at first, then dinner. She was kind, real, didn't care about the money or the property. She'd liked me when I had nothing. That meant everything. We took it slow. Both of us had been hurt before, but there was something there, something that felt right. Frank Morrison moved into the restored guest house behind the main farmhouse. He didn't have much family left. His wife had passed years ago. His kids lived out of state. I told him he was welcome to stay as long as he wanted. He'd saved my life, given me back my father's legacy. The least I could do was give him a home. He sat in a rocking chair on the back porch most evenings, watching the sunset over the valley. Sometimes I'd join him. We'd talk about Dad, about the old days, about the future. "Your father would sit right here," Frank said one evening. "Same view. He'd talk about you boys. Hope you'd both turn out all right." "1 out of 2, I said. "The right one." I thought about Brandon sometimes, wondered where he was, what he was doing. The last I'd heard, he'd moved out of state. Couldn't stand the shame of everyone in town knowing what he'd done. Couldn't face the criminal charges. The farmhouse he'd inherited was still condemned, still falling apart. He never fixed it. Eventually, he sold it to a developer for $30,000. Everything Dad had built with his own hands, sold for the price of a used car. I could have been angry. Part of me was. But mostly, I just felt sad. Sad that greed had destroyed my brother, turned him into something unrecognizable. Dad had seen it happening, had tried to prevent it, had built this elaborate plan to protect me and punish Brandon. And it had worked. On a cold December evening, I stood at Dad's grave. It was in the cemetery on the hill, overlooking the valley. Simple granite headstone with his name and dates. I'd added an inscription below. He taught his son what really matters. "I did it, Dad," I said to the stone. "I found the way. Just like you said." The wind blew through the bare trees. Somewhere, a bird called. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and red. I thought about everything I'd learned, about greed and what it does to people, about loyalty and sacrifice, about the difference between what's valuable and what matters. Dad hadn't left me a business. He'd left me a test, a trial by fire, a chance to prove who I really was when everything was taken away. And I'd passed, not because I was smarter than Brandon, not because I was stronger, but because I'd learned something he never could. That real wealth isn't measured in dollars or property or power over others. It's measured in integrity, in doing right even when it costs you everything, in staying loyal to the people who need you, in fighting for what's just, even when the fight seems impossible. Dad gave me the old farmhouse because he knew I'd see it for what it really was. Not a burden, not a punishment, but a foundation, a place to build something real, something that would last. Brandon saw the business as power, as a way to control people and accumulate more. That's why he lost it. I saw the farmhouse as home, as a connection to everything that mattered. That's why I kept it. 6 months of caring for a dying man had seemed like a sacrifice, like I was giving up my life, my career, my future, but it was the opposite. I was building something, a relationship with my father in his final days, an understanding of what really mattered. A foundation strong enough to survive my brother's attacks. Everything Brandon did to destroy me just made me stronger. The lawsuit taught me to fight. The betrayal taught me who to trust. The homelessness taught me what I could survive. Rock bottom taught me there was nowhere to go but up. And Dad's plan gave me the tools I needed when the time came. I walked back to my truck. Claire was waiting for me in the parking lot, sitting in her car. She'd offered to come with me to the cemetery, but I'd needed to do this alone. When she saw me, she got out, came over, hugged me without saying anything. Some people just know when you need that. We drove back to the farmhouse together. Frank was making dinner in the kitchen, something simple, pasta and salad. He'd insisted on cooking, said he needed to feel useful. We ate together at the big kitchen table Dad had built with his own hands 40 years ago, talked about ordinary things, laughed at stupid jokes, made plans for Christmas. It was everything I'd ever wanted. Not the money, not the victory over Brandon, just this: family, home, peace. Later that night, I sat on the porch alone. The stars were bright. The air was cold and clean. I could hear Miller Creek running through the valley below, the same water that had given me leverage over Brandon, the same water that had saved me. I thought about making a call, reaching out to Brandon, offering reconciliation. Part of me wanted to. Part of me missed my brother, or maybe I missed who he used to be before greed changed him. But I didn't call. Some bridges stay burned. Some people don't want to be saved. Brandon had made his choices. He'd have to live with them. I'd made mine too, and I was at peace. The farmhouse lights were warm behind me. Inside, people who cared about me, people I cared about. A life built on something real. Dad had left me more than property. He'd left me wisdom, a lesson about what matters, about who to be when no one's watching, about fighting for what's right even when it costs everything. I'd learned that lesson, lived it, survived it, and now I got to pass it on. The foundation I'd started was helping 3 families right now. People dealing with terminal illness. People who felt alone and overwhelmed like I had. I couldn't fix everything, couldn't save everyone, but I could help, could make a difference. That was Dad's real legacy. Not the business, not the property, but the understanding that we're measured by how we treat people when they're at their weakest, by whether we show up, whether we care, whether we do right even when no one's forcing us to. Brandon never learned that lesson. Maybe he never could. His whole life was about accumulation, about winning, about having more than everyone else. My life was about something different now, about connection, about meaning, about building something that would last longer than any bank account. I looked up at the stars, thought about Dad, hoped he could see this somehow, the farmhouse restored, his son living the kind of life he'd hoped for, the lessons passed on. "Thank you," I whispered to the night. "For everything." The wind answered. The creek sang. The farmhouse stood solid behind me. I was home, and that was worth more than $12 million. More than any inheritance. More than winning. It was worth everything. So let me ask you something. Have you ever had to choose between what's profitable and what's right? Between family loyalty and standing up for yourself? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story meant something to you, if it reminded you that integrity matters more than money, please hit that like button. Subscribe to hear more stories about real people facing real challenges. And share this with someone who might need to hear it. Someone who's fighting their own battle. Someone who needs to know they're not alone. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here. I hope whatever you're facing right now, you find the strength to do what's right, to fight for what matters, to never give up, even when it seems impossible. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and remember what really matters at the end of the day. It's not what you have, it's who you are.